Here's one reason for you to skip this video. I have very little knowledge when it comes to television series. However, consider this compelling reason to stay: my profound love for The Last of Us games. In fact, The Last of Us Part 2 isn't just a game to me. It holds the esteemed position of my all-time favorite gaming experience. Consequently, diving into the HBO adaptation was inevitable. In this video, I aim to break down Season 2, episode by episode, comparing the HBO series to its beloved gaming counterpart. I will skip a lot of unimportant scenes to me, but I'll delve into the noteworthy ones from each episode of what has been faithfully translated and what pivotal changes have been introduced, ultimately sharing whether those changes resonate with me or not. By the way, I'm making this video after watching each episode, hence I have no idea what happens in the subsequent episodes. So Rax plays turns, Rax watches for a day. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get into it. So Season 2 kicks off with a pretty contentious scene where we see Abby mourning the death of her father in the companionship of her WLF friends. The debatable part, of course, when Abby says, "When we find Joel, we kill him slowly." This, I think, softens the shock that we felt when we played Part 2 for the first time. It immediately establishes that there is a target on the back of Joel and we are in for trouble. I personally like this change. It is a fresh take and it raises the stakes from the get-go from a television series standpoint. By the way, I do really like the casting of the WLF group. Despite a striking visual departure from their game counterparts, their portrayal in this adaptation surprisingly feels organic and authentic. And yeah, maybe a bit too attractive to hate on, but I don't think that's what Craig and Neil is going for. I'll get into Caitlin Dever as Abby a little later. The next scene of importance in this episode is this one between Joel and Dina. This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole season, as it presents a very different dynamic in comparison to Part 2. Joel and Dina engage in no direct head-on conversations in the game, which now that I think about it, is weird, isn't it? Though their circumstances differ, Joel's connection with Dina in this scene blossoms into a quietly profound father-figure dynamic, mirroring the fierce protectiveness he developed for Ellie. This immediately adds a completely new layer to the story, as the hunt for eventual revenge now applies to Dina as well. And by the way, Isabela Merced absolutely kills it as Dina. I'm not gonna lie, I actually got a crush on this Dina. She's so attractive, and every time she's on, she steals the show with her expressions and cuteness. The following scene between Tommy and Ellie, which is by the way set much later into the game, is important despite not being a standout, because it underscores the divergence of Ellie from her game counterpart. She is a lot more childish and fun-loving compared to Ellie from the game, who was jarringly quiet and introverted. Furthermore, Tommy now has a kid, which again adds more emotional depth to his character compared to the game. He's probably more understanding of Joel's action to rescue Ellie, not to mention it is going to be harder for him to leave both his kid and Maria in search of Abby. The following scene is an interesting one. Joel's therapy session with the character portrayed by Catherine O'Hara, which directly mirrors the opening scene of the game. I love these subtle changes. It adds value to someone like me who has played through the game a double-digit number of times. Catherine O'Hara is incredible, and she has this murky delivery about her, very reminiscent of her character in Schitt's Creek. However, this scene does not hit anywhere near as hard as the game. Joel's intense delivery of "I saved her" in the game, a line that feels like a look into your soul, is unmatched by Pedro Pascal's interpretation for me. Next up, Ellie and Dina prepare to leave Jackson for their regular assignment. The Jesse in the show, by the way, is excellent. He has this leader aura to him and he bears a mirror image resemblance to the game's character. So much so, I was expecting him to just say, run your routes, mark your logbooks, you run into anything you can't handle, you come back. The subsequent scene depicts Ellie and Dina encountering infecteds, and I must admit, I hate this scene. In the game, the presence of the infected is genuinely horrifying, whereas their portrayal here, with what seems like they're in a theme park and they're making faces and stuff, feels very disconnecting to me. Okay, let's touch on Bella Ramsey as Ellie. You have probably heard me talk about this. Although I don't wish to engage in online negativity, her performance as Ellie simply does not work for me. Don't get me wrong, she's a brilliant actor, but this is just not good casting. This was a problem for me in the first season, where I kind of accepted her as a different Ellie, but here I just can't. She doesn't capture the game's dark and bleak Ellie. Here they run into stalkers as well. Once more, the capture of the stalker is excellent, achieving a level of horror comparable to the game. This also leads to another interesting addition to the series, and that is the Jackson Council, where they listen to the people that live there and make decisions on important matters. Very cool, and I must say, this season has really established Jackson as a living and breathing settlement. So much so that I think it does it way better than the game. The next scene, of course, the iconic barn scene between Ellie and Dina, where they dance, they kiss. The execution here is excellent, successfully evoking the memory of the scene as it appears in the game. Then there is the scene between Seth and Joel, which again hits nowhere near as hard as the game because it is taking place without any of the emotional baggage that builds up in the game at this point. I also love the tease of the porch scene, and I appreciate how the show plays with this anticipation, leaving the gamer audience eager whether it is going to happen or not. I mean, of course it will happen. This is one of the best scenes from the game. Concluding the first episode is a significant shot of the pipes, clearly revealing Jackson's vulnerability. This moment is paralleled by the immediate danger confronting Abby and her group, a perfect setup that generates considerable excitement for episode 2. For you to truly understand my thoughts on this episode, it's important that I share a bit of my thoughts about Season 1. I'm personally not a big fan of The Last of Us show. I appreciate its existence, I appreciate the production value, but for me, the game is just so much better. Big surprise, right? The gamer likes the game. So my excitement for Season 2 was not as high as some might think, based on my love for the game. But this episode completely changed that. I was so utterly blown away by it that I now consider it one of the most captivating TV experiences I have ever witnessed. Let's start from Scene 1. It's interesting that the show finally gave us a more detailed look at Abby and her learning about Joel's action against her father, considering this revelation occurs a good 12 to 14 hours into the game's narrative. One can't help but notice the show's potential attempt to mitigate negative reactions towards her character by presenting this context sooner. We also got a look at the WLF crew. Again, very attractive and nice people. I really don't hate them as much as I hated them in the game. The fact that Owen even contemplates persuading Abby to abandon her quest further underscores the show's apparent aim to proactively reduce potential animosity towards them. Another subtle yet impactful change sees Jesse working with Ellie and Dina alongside Joel. I actually like this pairing as it thoughtfully prepares the audience to see Dina as someone profoundly impacted by any harm that might come to Joel. On the downside, this shift in pairings means we will probably miss out on the quirky and intimate love scene that took place in Eugene's makeshift with Den. Moving on, we see Abby in a lone and determined search for Joel. This brings us to the casting of Caitlin Dever as Abby, and I have to say, I am a huge fan. Yes, the lack of Abby's significant muscle mass is a slight disappointment for me, but I have a bias towards Caitlin, particularly from her powerful performance in Unbelievable. And do you guys remember her as the cookie kid from Bad Teacher? Nevertheless, I love her, and she nails the role, as we will eventually see. Though it is also true that she would have been the perfect Ellie, and I will continue to hold that sentiment. As Abby slides down the hill on top of a horde of frozen infecteds, from this point forward, the show truly elevates to another level entirely. A momentum that carries it through to the end. Witnessing Abby's perilous journey towards her fateful encounter with Joel is just as enthralling, if not more so, than it was in the game, especially now that I find myself genuinely invested in her character. Let's shift our focus to Jackson, where the community is under siege by the infecteds, a terrifying consequence of contact with cordyceps roots within the pipes. This attack on Jackson is of course a completely original addition to the show's narrative, a departure from the game's events. While perhaps not strictly necessary, it proved to be incredibly entertaining. I actually felt the show truly needed this sequence. It was exceptionally well done. And the moment Tommy was cornered by that bloater, my heart was in my throat. They did a fantastic job of showcasing Tommy's capabilities in this episode. Oh, and we absolutely cannot forget the dogs. So cool. Next, we move on to Baldwin's place, and inevitably Joel's devastating death scene. While the game's version had me sobbing uncontrollably, this adaptation, though not reaching the same emotional depth, still landed with a significant impact in my opinion. The show, however, couldn't quite capture the dark and somber atmosphere that permeated this moment in the game. Nevertheless, the performances were undeniably strong across the board. Pedro Pascal's portrayal of Joel remained pitch perfect, and Caitlin Dever truly embodied the Abby I know from the games, even if the physical appearance was absent. And despite my reservations about Bella Ramsey as Ellie, her acting in this scene was undeniably brilliant, capturing the raw emotion of the moment with remarkable skills. Overall, episode 2 of season 2 is the best episode of the whole series. While the impact didn't quite reach the level of the game's rendition for me personally, as a standalone television episode, I was absolutely glued to the screen. This episode truly served as a major turning point, completely hooking me into the show and leaving me in eager anticipation for the following week's episode. And by the way, I'm so glad they included Ashley Johnson's rendition of Through the Valley in the last scene. It was so touching. Do you agree with my view on episode 2? Let me know in the comments. There's not much to talk about in regards to episode 3. This episode bore very little resemblance to the source material and ultimately felt like a diversion that didn't serve the overarching narrative. But there are some notable scenes I want to talk about. The morgue scene, where we see Tommy mourning Joel's death, followed by Ellie's PTSD scene, was very hard to watch. I also appreciate how the show consistently portrays Jackson as a vibrant and thriving community, and it's now compelling to see its effort to rebuild and recover after the attack. The only true echo of the game in this episode for me was the poignant scene of Ellie going through Joel's house and his belongings. That sequence was so well done. It genuinely transported me back into the game's emotional landscape. The episode regains some momentum as we see Ellie and Dina's reunion and their subsequent discussion about pursuing Joel's killers. Notably, Dina is portrayed as having a much deeper understanding of the WLF than in the game, a change I appreciate as it organically integrates her into Ellie's quest for justice, something I mentioned in the last episode as well. Next, the brief glimpse we get of the Seraphites in this episode falls flat for me. The initial encounter with them in the game was so incredibly menacing, a sense of dread that is completely absent here. By humanizing this group so early, the show diminishes the impact of their introduction, a reveal I felt should have been handled with more suspense and perhaps later in the narrative. Speaking of humanizing, they humanized Seth. Remember him? The homophobic guy? It's interesting how they have significantly expanded the role of a character who was barely present in the game. I actually really like this development. This expanded portrayal contributes to the show's cool and compelling depiction of Jackson as a close-knit, almost familial community, something further proven by another glimpse of Jackson Council as they vote against going after the wolves. Moving on, Dina and Ellie start preparing to sneak out of Jackson to Seattle. I have to mention again how incredibly cool I found the scene where Seth trades rifles with Ellie, culminating in that impactful handshake. It was a small moment, but it resonated deeply. Finally, we are on our way to Seattle and it is beautifully captured. It just took me back to the moment we explored the open-ended section in the game. Subsequently, the episode ended with this sweeping shot of the city and the immediate danger of the wolves. Overall, this felt like a filler episode for the most part, and the moment I knew that this season alone won't cover the whole game. But it had cool moments and expansion of the existing lore that I found interesting. So a good enough episode, but coming off from the highs of episode 2, it felt underwhelming. Episode 4 starts off very strong, and it comes off as a glaring example what I wanted the show to be, expanding on the existing lore. And it does that. We knew from collectibles and environmental storytelling in the game of how the WLF has won the war against Fedra. This is visually brought to life in a truly cool and memorable scene, where Isaac Dixon masterfully takes down an entire tank of Fedra through sheer deception, brilliantly playing both sides of the conflict. Jeffrey Wright nails the role as Isaac Dixon, another perfect casting in my opinion. That scene later on where he's torturing the Seraphite soldier was exceptionally well done, a horrifying and impactful representation of the corresponding moment from the game. Next up, we see Dina and Ellie exploring a lot more of Seattle in search of the wolves. The show's capture of the Seattle environments is nothing short of brilliant. It's as if the game has been vividly brought to life before my eyes. This exceptional level of detail and accuracy is genuinely what sustains my enthusiasm for the series. It shows that the creators care. Speaking of the environments, while the visual recreation of the music store scene is undeniably well done, this particular scene didn't resonate with me as strongly as it did in the game. Dina's emotional reaction to the singing felt somewhat overdramatic in comparison to the game's beautifully understated moment. Let's move on to the TV station scene now, which I have no idea why it is taking place at night. Personally, I feel it was a weird creative choice, because the lighting of this scene in the game is magnificent yet dreadful. Here, I don't see shit. Another aspect of this episode that felt jarring for me was the portrayal of these two kids effectively fighting off trained military personnel. While this kind of action is a common gameplay element in the game, it stretched my suspension of disbelief within the show's more grounded reality. And I'm worried this is going to be a bigger problem later on as well. We will see, I guess. What follows is another absolutely enthralling chase sequence against overwhelming hordes of infected. It was awesome and incredibly well done. I also loved the subtle yet brilliant detail of Dina being able to count the infected based on their sounds and signaling that number with her fingers. So cool. The show strikes a really good balance here. It deviates enough from the game to feel fresh and engaging, but it doesn't stray so far as to become a disappointment for those familiar with the source material. The subsequent scene where Ellie seemingly sacrifices herself to protect Dina from a bite felt contrived, and I hate how they're just spamming the bites. This then led to an even more awkward and frankly cringeworthy sequence in the movie theater, with Dina pointing a gun at Ellie out of fear of infection. Comparing this to the game, this whole portrayal fell completely flat for me. From the unearned revolution of Ellie's immunity to Dina's pregnancy reveal and the lack of palpable chemistry in their love scene. I'd even go as far to say this was one of the show's lowest points. Again, this is likely a perspective heavily influenced by my experience with the game, and those unfamiliar with the source material might have a different reaction. This scene was awesome in the game. Sadly, I can't say the same here. My overall impression of episode 4 is that it felt like another instance of filler. The events depicted seemed to be mostly drawn from gameplay segments of Seattle Day 1, and the significant narrative beats were, in my opinion, not handled with the care they deserved. Following two somewhat lackluster episodes, Episode 5 absolutely needed to reignite the urgency to find Joel's killer. In my opinion, this crucial motivation, so immediately evident in the game from the moment we step foot in Seattle, is missing here. I want to see the angry and enraged Ellie that is so central to the story of Part 2. And this episode really delivered. Instead of a typical scene-by-scene dissection, my approach to this episode is different because the writers seem to be deliberately unfolding a singular elongated narrative experience with this one. Rather than following a specific thread from the game, this episode conspicuously jumps between various plot points and character moments from Ellie's Seattle Day 2 and Day 3. One of the most significant improvements in this episode, in my opinion, is the much more accurate and chilling portrayal of the Seraphites. In stark contrast to my previous concerns with their depiction in episode 3, the Seraphites in this episode are a standout element. Moments like the juxtaposition of the "Feel Her Love" graffiti with the visceral scene of the Seraphites taking down a WLF soldier in the park are incredibly effective. This direct mirroring of the game perfectly encapsulates their unsettling duality. Speaking of chilling portrayal, we meet up with the Stalkers again, a sequence that is a masterclass in suspense. Given Dina's emotional vulnerability established earlier in the episode, the possibility of her getting infected felt terrifyingly real. There was a brief moment where I felt, is Dina getting infected? It was a relief to see Jesse step in and alleviate the immediate danger. This moment clearly draws inspiration from Hillcrest, where Jesse intervenes in the game, which makes the absence of Hillcrest's capture in the series so far a little disappointing. It was such a pivotal location, and I'm not sure if we will see it later. It's very unlikely. Again, the pacing of this episode is a significant improvement compared to episode 3 and 4. The way it effortlessly flows from the tense stalker scene to the park encounter and then directly into Ellie's break-in at Lake Hill Hospital is incredibly enthralling. Ellie's navigation through the heavily infested area of the hospital highlights the infection's increasing potency, a subtle yet very effective detail. Adding to the intensity, this episode immediately throws us into the confrontation between Ellie and Nora. On a potentially meta level, it was also great to see Nora rocking the bald look from Naughty Dog's upcoming title, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, a neat little nod for eagle-eyed fans. The confrontation with Nora was exceptionally well done, mirroring the game almost verbatim. I really appreciated that level of faithfulness to such a crucial scene. Despite my reservations about the show's Ellie, Bella Ramsey's performance in this scene was great, and I could see imprints of Ellie's bleakness in the game, which are her core characteristics. Consequently, the intense red lighting taken from the game serves as a striking visual motif for Ellie's rage, a detail the show masterfully captures. What I also found interesting is how much information we got in this scene, something in the game required multiple flashbacks to convey. While the show's Nora confrontation was pretty impactful, I still feel the game executed this scene with a greater sense of visceral intensity. The more intense red lighting and close-up perspective in the game amplified Ellie's rage in a way that felt more immediate and unsettling, even without relying on mild gore as it does here. This episode's conclusion with that brief Joel and Ellie scene, likely from the museum flashback, what a way to end the episode, that leaves the gamer audience like us longing for the next one. Overall, this was a fantastic episode and a significant return to form for the show after a couple of pretty weak entries. With its intense pacing, faithful adaptations of key Part 2 moments, and that intriguing glimpse of the museum flashback at the end, this felt like the most authentic Part 2 episode yet. Following this trajectory, it's hard to imagine anything but a stark and somber path for Ellie from this point forward, something the game established in no time. To conclude, the prospect of the next episode is incredibly exciting. Next week, here I come. For the gamer audience, the anticipation for episode 6 is absolutely through the roof. It's not just the thrilling cliffhanger from the last episode driving the excitement, but also the significant fact that Neil Druckmann himself directed this entire episode. Without a doubt, this episode is a remarkable achievement. It's the most accurate depiction of the game we've been given so far. And for me, it unequivocally marks the show's absolute best. I really thought episode 2 was going to be the highlight of the season, but wow, they completely surpassed my expectations with this one. Following my approach from the last episode, this one undeniably warrants the same. This episode's genius lies in its ability to combine all of Joel and Ellie's flashbacks from the game into a single cohesive narrative, all while deftly infusing the profound symbolism we cherish. It honors their special bond with the same fidelity and emotional impact as the source material, and I was enthralled from beginning to end. This episode's cold open, much like others in the series, was artfully done, offering a peek into Joel and Tommy's early lives. However, even after watching the entire episode, I found myself still puzzled over its significance and what message it was ultimately trying to convey. But from that point forward, the episode becomes an absolute heart melter, captivating you with every passing moment. It poignantly depicts 3 of Ellie's birthdays, each a joyous occasion for Joel, as he thoughtfully creates distinct and special surprises for her year after year. And naturally, we have to commend Pedro Pascal's portrayal of Joel. He absolutely masters the character, delivering a performance that only grows richer and more nuanced with every passing scene. While Joel's past is riddled with terrible deeds, it's his boundless love for Ellie that truly defines him, eclipsing all else. This episode, in particular, delves deeper into that profound bond, offering an unprecedented, focused, and thorough exploration of Joel that was less visible in the second game. The episode beautifully portrays the tender scene of Joel giving Ellie the guitar and then singing for her, a truly heartwarming moment. This is seamlessly followed by the entire museum sequence, including the iconic spaceship scene, which stands as one of the game's best moments. The care and attention to detail here are simply remarkable. However, despite my best efforts to overlook it, I still find myself unable to fully accept Bella Ramsey as Ellie. Her portrayal just doesn't quite resonate with me as the character. What I do absolutely love though is how masterfully the show handles the conflict surrounding what Joel is hiding from Ellie. Rather than her directly discovering it at the Salt Lake Hospital as in the game, the truth is revealed to her gradually, bit by bit. I actually consider this one of those rare instances where the show's approach to this narrative element surpassed the game's execution. Adding to that tension, the symbolism of the moth is flawlessly integrated, beautifully representing death, a thematic element that felt somewhat absent from the show until now. In this episode, it serves as the crucial thread that weaves everything together, powerfully connecting the various narrative points. It's precisely these thoughtful expansions on the existing lore that I so deeply appreciate about this show. Oh, and here's another neat little nod I have to mention. Did anyone else notice how they recreated that particular wallpaper in this scene? I'm not sure if it was intentional, but I thought that was incredibly cool. Anyway, I digress. I would have initially guessed that the absolute peak of this episode would be the masterful recreation of the flashbacks from the game, but I was happily proven wrong. For me, the entire Eugene storyline stood out as the undisputed highlight. Watching that scene completely shattered my heart. It so perfectly portrays the somber and utterly unfair world of The Last of Us. What's more, this is a completely original storyline, expertly expanded upon a character we know so little of and taken to an entirely new level. Just wow. I found myself genuinely teary-eyed watching it. Joe Pantoliano absolutely kills it. It also serves as a crucial narrative device, truly revealing Joe's authentic character and his lies in front of Ellie, adding fuel to the tension that was building in a completely unique way to the game. Last but certainly not least, the episode culminates with the heartbreaking porch scene. While it was subtly hinted at in episode 1, its inclusion here was inevitable. This is the moment that always gets me in the game. I openly wept like a baby playing the game, and its emotional impact is just as potent here. While one could quibble about the show's Joel and Ellie not perfectly mirroring their game counterparts, I find it impossible to disregard the fact that both actors are brilliant. They consistently pour their hearts and souls into their performances, truly bringing these beloved characters to vivid life. And I absolutely love how it masterfully weaves together the crucial conversations from both the porch scene and outside the Salt Lake Hospital into one incredibly potent moment. It's truly very well executed. This episode packs an immense punch, undeniably forging the bloodthirsty Ellie of the game, ready to embark on her relentless quest for revenge. The outro scene masterfully seals this fate. For Ellie, it's now a one-way road with no detours. To summarize, this is now, without a doubt, my favorite episode of the whole show. It truly shines in its faithfulness to the game, how it brilliantly expands on existing lore, and its masterful ability to seamlessly weave together so many pivotal scenes into one coherent narrative. This episode perfectly embodies the essence of The Last of Us. I genuinely have no negative critiques for this one. If I were to nitpick, my only slight apprehension will be the lack of Dina in this episode, because I really thought they prepared her in the earlier episodes to be just as vital in Ellie's quest for revenge. And another nitpick is how this episode might impact the season finale. Given that an entire episode was dedicated to building up the immense importance of Ellie's revenge, and there's still so much to cover in the last episode, I'm genuinely curious to see how they'll manage to tackle it all. So, the season finale, let's do this. I don't have much positive to say about episode 7. Despite my previous remarks about the season finale's extensive narrative demands, it regrettably fell short. The pacing was excessively sluggish, and even with two-thirds of the episode elapsed, it failed to evoke the sensation of a true season closer. For players of the game who understood the significant plot points needing a resolution, the episode felt more akin to a routine mid-season entry. If I had to distill this episode into a single sentence, I'd say it suffered from TMI, too much information. This is particularly perplexing because a statement by Colin Moriarty from Last Stand Media made during his podcast with Neil Druckmann truly struck a chord with me. I highly recommend you watch that podcast, by the way. It's very insightful of the show. He said, and I quote, "The best part of The Last of Us is the things that you don't know." A philosophy I completely endorse, but one that the show unfortunately strays far from. Take, for example, the conversation between Jesse and Ellie in this bookstore. They attempted to introduce a love triangle that was not really explored much in the game, with Jesse recounting meeting a past girlfriend and then stating how he loves Dina but not as much as Ellie loves her. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why are they wasting precious time on needless stuff like this in the season finale? Or take Ellie's near-death confrontation with the Seraphites. This sequence, clearly mimicking Abby's near hanging in the game, was shoehorned in and added no value to the episode. The show had already established the Seraphite and WLF conflict so effectively. As for Dina, she consistently proved to be a highlight this season, truly impressing me in this episode. I admire her sharp wit, especially considering she is simultaneously navigating pregnancy and a physical injury. Incidentally, the scene where Dina gives Ellie the lucky bracelet was completely ruined. This particular moment held significant emotional weight in the game, providing crucial encouragement before Ellie embarked on her mission in Hillcrest. Speaking of squandering valuable time, even the confrontation between Jesse and Ellie, a moment so impactful in the game, was padded with a plethora of meaningless, unstated sentiments. This completely broke my immersion in the show. While every line uttered by characters in the game is meticulously written and crafted, this level of precision is occasionally missing from the show, resulting in moments of cringiness. Frankly, there's little of significance to discuss regarding this episode. Let's just move on to Ellie's journey to the Seattle Aquarium. I must praise the show for how incredibly well they've established this location from the game. They've truly captured the storm and overall atmosphere with stunning accuracy. This visual fidelity is something the show consistently excels at. I only wish we had seen their rendition of Hillcrest in some way in this episode. But I digress. Then of course, we witnessed the confrontation between Ellie, Mel, and Owen. I absolutely loved this scene. The show added immense depth, particularly with Mel's death, emphasizing her pregnancy and motherhood so powerfully. Mel's desperate pleas for Ellie to get the baby out before she died were heartbreaking. They imbued this scene with such profound emotional depth, truly capturing the game's core message about the futility of revenge. We then move on to what is arguably the most significant scene of both the game and this episode. Speaking of excellent casting, Caitlin Dever as Abby is simply outstanding. Though I admit I am biased. Her delivery in this scene perfectly channeled Abby's essence. The anger in her eyes was truly incredible. This scene weirdly felt brief compared to the game, but it was magnificent and remarkably faithful to the game. Next, the season concludes with another incredibly faithful moment from the game, Abby enjoying the mesmerizing view of the WLF Stadium. This further reinforces my point about the show's perfect capture of locations. They have truly nailed it here as well. Ultimately, this was a disappointing episode. It did not feel like a season finale. More so when you compare to the highs of the last episode. The episode began exceptionally slow, needlessly shoehorning in extraneous details when numerous crucial plot points could have been explored. While it did conclude well, naturally, given the incredibly strong source material, I'm not as energized as I usually am after a powerful season of a show. I'll discuss my anticipation for the third season in the video's closing thoughts. In conclusion, this episode left me with a lingering sense of disappointment, especially after two very strong preceding episodes. I'll even go as far to say this is the worst episode of the season. Just before we get to the closing thoughts, let's talk about this R75 gaming mechanical keyboard from Royal Kludge that they were kind enough to send my way. Seriously, this is a fantastically built keyboard. It boasts awesome hot swappable keycaps, brilliant RGB illumination, and a super convenient volume knob for your connected device. This hot-selling keyboard is linked in the description below, so definitely check it out. Alright, back to the video. Alright, The Last of Us Season 2. When I look back at the season as a whole, I think it's a good season, which in my opinion is quite an achievement. I didn't expect much from this season because I feel it's exceptionally difficult to adapt The Last of Us Part 2 into a show. The game is so deeply ingrained in its medium, and part of its charm comes directly from that beloved format. However, this was a commendable effort. The show expanded on some very minor side plots from the game, which I actually considered its highest points. For instance, the Eugene storyline and Isaac's deception of Fedra were brought to life compellingly. Yet, in terms of faithful character moments to the game, it rarely excelled. On the other hand, the locations and environmental details are incredibly faithful, showcasing a notable effort. This is certainly not a throwaway TV adaptation, far from it. There's so much love and care poured into it, like the simple detail I didn't even mention in the video, how the intro removed Joel after episode 2, after his eventual demise. And again, as I've mentioned before, Bella Ramsey as Ellie simply doesn't work for me. This season in particular was much harder to accept, especially considering the game's Ellie is older and looks nothing like her. I truly tried to embrace it, but I just couldn't, especially when other characters like Dina and even Jesse became the highlights. Which shouldn't be the case, as Ellie is the most important character. I'll acknowledge this as a me problem. She performed exceptionally well and is a great actor, but that's just not the Ellie I know and love from the game. That being said, I'm still excited for Season 3. I'm curious to see how they'll tackle it, especially given the intriguing Seattle Day 1 sign at the end. And again, I love Caitlin Dever. I'm genuinely waiting for it. To put a pin in this video, if I were to rate Season 1 of this show, I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10. For Season 2, I'd likely give it a 7. It's good but not great, experiencing both the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm not entirely confident about this video as it's my first critic of a television show, so please let me know in the comments if my insights provided any value. This was a tough video to create, almost a month in the making as the episodes rolled out, so I truly appreciate it if you subscribed. That would genuinely make my day. Thank you for your time. Rax Plays, signing off.